On 6 May 2019, American Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in Finland. He gave a speech for the Arctic Council that upset some Canadians.
It is not the only nation making illegitimate claims. The U.S. has a long contested feud with Canada over sovereign claims through the Northwest Passage.
Pompeo was talking about the passages that connect the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. Historically, these were inaccessible most of the year. But with global warming, this is changing, and interest in this desolate place is heating up. Companies could benefit from shorter shipping times and fuel savings of up to $200,000. Tourism and geopolitics also lurk around the corner. And yet, interest in this barren region is not new. In fact, for hundreds of years, countless explorers tried to find a way through this icy archipelago. Today I want to talk about the age-old quest for the mythical Northwest Passage. The myth was the grave of many, and made some resort to the biggest human taboo. And then, one famous explorer found a way through. The history of these passages doesn't begin in the age of exploration. Inuit lived in the area for thousands of years, and Norse travelers also left their mark. But these people were not specifically searching for a passage from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Today I want to tell you about 3 explorers and how their travels made a mark on our world. And I am pretty sure you know the third one. So, where did the search for this Northwest Passage come from? Well, as soon as the Europeans touched upon the Americas, they tried to find a way around the continent. Because, well, Asia was the real prize. The Americas must really have felt like sloppy seconds.
What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
So where do we find this route? Look at this map. It shows the challenge of mapmakers. Without facts, mapmakers speculated and myths ensued. One such myth is that of the Strait of Ainan. Spanish explorers think that California is actually an island and the Strait of Ainan leads to Europe. So this appears on a lot of maps. Even when California is found to be very much connected to the mainland, the strait remains on maps. But you might say the route north isn't the only way. What about going south? Well, the Dutch do round the south of South America, and they name it after a Dutch city, of course. And then you have the Strait of Magellan. Both are very dangerous, so the search for a safer passage continues. With the myth of the Northwest Passage established, who is our first explorer? Our first explorer is Henry Hudson. This guy has experience as a polar explorer. He is hired by the Dutch to look for an alternative route to Asia. His Dutch bosses actually want him to go northeast, but he is obsessed with the Northwest Passage. On his first Dutch trip, he sails up the Hudson River, which he thinks is a possible seaway. And lo and behold, he finds it's named after him. He finds some suitable land that the Dutch later think they buy from the locals. And then they make a new city here, New Amsterdam. Yes, New York was actually Dutch. Later, Hudson is back with a vengeance. On his 4th voyage, he goes directly for what he thinks is a Northwest Passage. Here, Hudson finds another waterway named after him, Hudson's Bay. And they say lightning doesn't strike twice. It's crazy cold, and the crew on Hudson have been away for a long time. Hudson wants to continue, but his crew says, well, we're done with this. They start a mutiny and put Hudson on a boat to fend for himself. He is never to be seen again. Ouch. Many more attempts follow, but one expedition has to be named. The fated attempt by John Franklin and his crew. At this time, it's the 1800s, and the British have set their sights on finally finding this waterway. And when the Brits want something in this time period, they get it. He goes with 2 ships that have all the modern amenities. Reinforced hulls, a coal engine, a huge crew. There was just one problem. The ships were called Erebus, that's a Greek deity that personifies darkness, and Terror. These sound like great names for a safe passage. For all their modernism, they of course neglected to ask the locals how they survived in these awful temperatures. The Brits are clothed in wool, which keeps you warm, but so warm it makes you sweat like crazy. And then your clothing freezes, and then the frozen clothing is not really keeping you warm anymore. They also took with them modern canned food, sealed with lead. And this gave them lead poisoning, and that really impairs their judgment. So Franklin gets stuck in the ice, frozen. And for all their initial optimism, they weren't actually well. For 2 years, no one hears anything. His wife is like, well, maybe something is wrong. We could go have a look. And the British government goes, nah. They're going to the most inhospitable place in the world, with ships marked by the devil. What could go wrong? Eventually, they do start a search. They put a price on his discovery, and people go looking. A lot of people. But they can't really find him. Eventually, there's a guy that goes and talks to the local people. And they tell him Franklin's men all died, and they died as cannibals. Back home, no one wants to believe good English gentlemen would do that, so he is shunned. Until it was proven that he was actually totally right. So much for English gentlemen. So 400 years have passed, huge expedition with hundreds of men have been put up, and still no straight sailing. And then there's a Norwegian dude on a herring boat. He decides to keep to the shore and talk to the locals. He learns how to make igloos, learns about the surroundings, and he shares the drip of the locals, which make him feel great. The low draft of his boat and his local knowledge means he's the first one to make it to the other side. The name of this Norwegian dude? Roland Amundsen. Wait a second, isn't that the guy that reached the South Pole first? And who beat Scott by actually using clothing suited for the climate? And using sled dogs instead of horses and pulling your own sleds? What a guy. So eventually the strait was conquered, sort of. Amundsen was still frozen for almost 2 years.
Cold never bothered me anyway.
It has been mostly military and research trips since. The first commercial bulk carrier that made the trip on its own was only in 2013. So, hopefully I showed you how the current activity fits in an age-old interest in this region. It shows how modern obsession with shorter shipping routes have historic roots that go back hundreds of years and cost the life of countless explorers. How a myth made sailors search for a waterway that might not even have been there at all, and that even the existence of water didn't make for an easy passage. And with global warming, traffic might heat up in the coming years. Another thing that can heat you up is good spicy food. And you can watch this video if you want to know how Surinamese food has been influenced by the colonial past up to this day.